There's a strange moment, right before the sun breaks through the blinds, when silence feels louder than anything else. That's what I remember first. The silence. Not birds. Not traffic. Just the stillness pressing on my chest. My name's Elwood, and if that already sounds old-fashioned to you, imagine growing up with it in North Dakota. But this isn't about my name. This is about a morning when my wife didn't just leave the bed, she left everything. I've always been the guy who clings to routines. Same oatmeal every morning. Same pair of boots I've had since college. And for 9 years, the same woman, Celia. She was always more colorful than me. Brighter. Bolder. The kind of person who walks into a room and makes waiters forget who they were serving. We lived in a quiet part of the Midwest, in a house her parents helped us buy. Not because we were poor, but because Celia said she needed roots but not too deep. I should have paid attention to that phrase. That morning, I woke up in our bed, flannel sheets bunched under my arm, Celia's side empty. But her pillow was still warm. That meant she hadn't been gone long. At first, I didn't panic. She was probably just in the kitchen. Or maybe watering her silly potted lemon tree she named Duke. But there was no humming, no sound of the kettle, no footsteps. Only her phone, buzzing on the nightstand. Now here's the thing. I'm not a snooper. I'm the guy who once apologized for accidentally seeing her email open. But this time, the screen was glowing like a warning. And it said, "He's still asleep. Sneak out the back. I can't stop thinking about your lips on me." I blinked, then blinked again. I thought it was some twisted spam. But then my stomach turned in a way it never had before. The message was from someone saved as Parker Books. We don't know any Parkers. And Celia hasn't read a book in years. I sat up too fast. My head buzzed. I walked from room to room, barefoot, cold floor under my feet. I checked the bathroom. Nothing. Checked the backyard. Empty. Her keys were gone. Her coat, too. And it hit me. She wasn't in the kitchen. She wasn't in the house. She'd left. Not for a walk. Not for coffee. But for him. And the message? That wasn't a moment of weakness. That was a plan. I stood there in our hallway, surrounded by wedding photos and dog-eared postcards she used to leave on my windshield with doodled hearts. And I felt like the stupidest man in the entire state. But what I didn't know, not yet, was that Celia's betrayal went far beyond a kiss. She wasn't just cheating. She was escaping. And I was just starting to see the cracks. I sat on the edge of our bed for a long time, just holding her phone. I didn't open it, not yet. I don't think I had the courage. Or maybe it was something worse than fear. Maybe it was the tiny, pathetic sliver of hope that if I didn't read more, it wouldn't be real. That somehow ignorance would rewind the clock and make Celia walk back in with bagels and an apology for being gone so early. But the silence was louder now. It echoed through the house, bouncing off the tiles in the hallway and creeping into my bones. The morning sun was pushing through the window in our dining room, lighting up the table where we had dinner last night. We had soup. She laughed when I spilled pepper in mine. She kissed my head and called me a mess. A sweet mess, she said. It was a lie. I finally walked into the kitchen, hoping for a note, a clue, something that made sense. Her favorite coffee mug was still in the drying rack. The pink one with the tiny chip near the lip. But the kettle was cold. The back door was unlocked. My heart skipped at that. Celia never left it unlocked. Ever. It felt like a thread snapping. I opened the fridge and then closed it, not really seeing anything inside. I don't know why I even checked. Habit, maybe. I guess when your whole world starts falling apart, your body clings to routine like a dying branch. Then, stupidly, I sat at the table and stared at my phone. I hadn't texted her yet. I didn't know what to say. Hey, did you run off to meet the man you've been kissing behind my back? Or morning, sunshine, just saw your little secret. Need anything from the store? I hated how my brain tried to make jokes when I wanted to cry. And I did cry. Not loudly. Not like in the movies. Just quietly, like leaking. Like someone had knocked over something inside of me and didn't care enough to pick it up. But it was the smell that finally broke me. Her perfume, faint but present, lingering in the hallway like she'd sprinted out of the house and left a trail of herself behind. It was the same perfume she wore on our first anniversary. I remember because I bought it for her. She used to call it the scent of good memories. That morning, it smelled like betrayal. I picked up her phone again. The screen had locked, but I knew the code. I'd watched her enter it 1,000 times, always fast, always without hiding it from me, like someone with nothing to conceal. For digits later, I was in. The message was still there. But it wasn't alone. There were dozens. Hundreds, maybe. Some short. Some so detailed I had to look away. And pictures. Not the kind you ever want to see when they're not for you. My chest tightened. My throat closed up like someone was pushing their hands into it from the inside. I put the phone down before I smashed it against the wall. That's when I noticed something else. An unsent draft, half-written and sitting in her notes app. It read, Elwood, if you're reading this, it means I left earlier than I planned. I was going to tell you today, I swear. You deserve someone who sees you. I haven't seen you in a long time. Please don't hate me. I stared at those words until they blurred. She was going to leave me, not just emotionally, not just with another man. She was going to physically disappear. And she was going to do it today. That day. Like it was just another Tuesday. I put the phone down and walked to the front door. I had no idea where she was. No clue who this Parker was. But something inside me, something quiet and shaking, told me this was just the start. What I didn't know then was how deep Celia's disappearance would go, or what I'd find when I finally tracked down Parker. It wasn't just an affair. It was something else entirely. And it was going to ruin more than just our marriage. I didn't leave the house for 3 hours. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe for the door to swing open and for her to walk in like nothing happened. Maybe for her to say, I made a mistake, or even just, I couldn't do it. I would have taken anything, even a lie. Because silence is cruel. It's not passive. It's intentional. And Celia's silence that morning felt like a hammer to the ribs. I finally moved. I took a long, slow shower, the kind you take after funerals. I don't even remember if the water was hot. I dressed without thinking, threw on jeans and the sweater she always teased me about, the one with the threadbare cuffs. You look like a sad librarian in that thing, she once said. Funny how I wore it now like armor. Then I grabbed her phone. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be that guy, the one scrolling through their spouse's secrets, building mountains out of text messages. But when someone leaves you with only fragments, you start stitching the pieces together, even if they cut you. I opened her location sharing. Still on. A tiny blue dot blinked across town, in the Riverbend district, right near the old textile mill. That place had been turned into some artsy lofts years ago, the kind that only people without kids and without responsibilities could afford. And it was there that the dot stopped moving. I didn't think. I just drove. The streets blurred under me. I don't even remember the lights. It was like being inside a dream where you're watching yourself from the passenger seat, screaming but not making a sound. When I arrived, I parked half a block away. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the keys between the seats. The building looked like a magazine cover, tall windows, ivy climbing up brick, and a row of boutique mailboxes out front. My stomach turned when I saw a nameplate on the mailbox, P. Adler. I hadn't known his last name. Now I did. Parker Adler. I buzzed the apartment. No answer. Buzzed again. Still nothing. I started to turn away when a woman exited the building, holding a yoga mat and a smoothie. I mumbled something about visiting a friend. She smiled and held the door. And just like that, I was inside. The hallway smelled like paint and incense. I walked slowly, each footstep echoing off the polished concrete. Apartment 3C was on the left. I stood in front of the door, heart hammering, mouth dry. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't want to yell. I didn't even want to see her. I just needed to understand. Before I could knock, the door opened. And Parker, if that was even his real name, stepped out. He wasn't what I expected. Younger than Celia by a good 10 years. Smooth face. Designer stubble. Shirtless, holding a coffee mug that said, "Do more." I froze, and so did he. Then he smiled. Like he knew me. Like he'd been waiting. "Oh," he said, voice calm. "You're Elwood." He said it like a fact, not a question. My throat tightened. "Where's my wife?" Parker didn't flinch. "Celia's not here." She was. Briefly. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, blinking at this man who somehow looked like every mistake I never made. He leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms. "She didn't tell you the truth, did she?" "What truth?" I asked. He smirked. That this wasn't her first time. My knees almost gave out. But it wasn't his words that crushed me. It was what he said next. "She said you wouldn't take it well. She said you'd break." He was right. But even Parker didn't know the full story, the one Celia had been hiding from both of us. And by the time I found it out, I realized she hadn't just left. She was erasing me. I didn't say anything else to Parker. I didn't punch him. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out of that hallway like my body had been hollowed out. My steps felt disconnected from the floor beneath me. Outside, the sunlight looked unreal, too bright for how dark everything inside me had gone. I sat in the car with my hands gripping the steering wheel and realized I was shaking. Not with rage. Not even heartbreak. Just exhaustion. It's strange. The moment you understand that your life hasn't just cracked but caved in, you don't explode. You dissolve. I must have sat there for nearly an hour before I even turned the key. The whole time, I kept thinking about what Parker said. That it wasn't her first time. That she had lied to both of us. That part haunted me. Because somewhere in my pathetic, shattered heart, I was still trying to believe this was a one-time thing. That it was a mistake. A lapse. Something we could fix. But now I had to face the truth. Celia wasn't just cheating. She was strategic. When I got home, I walked straight to the filing cabinet in the guest room. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I was just chasing ghosts, or maybe my gut had finally started screaming loud enough for me to hear it. I opened the bottom drawer, the one she never used. Inside, wedged behind an envelope of old receipts, was a slim black folder. I pulled it out with trembling hands. Inside were printed emails, dozens of them. Flights. Hotel confirmations. Messaging logs. She'd used a second email. One I didn't know existed. Most of the trips were to Chicago, one to Denver. All booked under her maiden name. And not just that. There were receipts for dinners. Spa reservations. Jewelry purchases. None of them made in her name. They were made by someone named Marion Shaw. That's not Parker. That's not anyone I'd ever heard of. I sat on the floor and started matching dates. That week she said she had a regional marketing retreat in Minneapolis. That wasn't a hotel her company would have used. It was some boutique place with a couple's package. Valentine's Day 2 years ago, when I had the flu, and she said she was visiting her sister to avoid catching it. She was in Colorado. With Marion. I wasn't married to someone who had a fling. I was married to someone who had an entire second life. It was like peeling back layers of wallpaper and discovering there was no wall behind it, just a hole leading to nowhere. I didn't even realize I was on the floor crying until I noticed the folder had gone damp. My tears soaked through the edge of it. My vision blurred again. My chest hurt like I'd swallowed a rock. My whole life was slipping through my fingers, and I couldn't hold onto a single part of it. And then, a quiet knock at the door. I froze. I stood up, walked slowly to the front, hoping, praying that maybe it was her. Maybe she'd come back. Maybe she had answers. An apology. Even a half-truth would have been something. But it wasn't Celia. It was a courier. Delivery for Elwood Bramer, he said. I nodded, still half in a daze, and signed for the envelope. Inside was a letter. Not typed. Not cold. Handwritten. It wasn't from Celia. It was from Marion. And it began. You don't know me, but I've known your wife for a very long time. I think it's time we talk. That was the moment I realized I wasn't even close to the bottom. There was so much more to uncover. And Celia, she wasn't just hiding. She was running from something and dragging me through the wreckage behind her. I stood there in my hallway holding that letter like it might burn through my fingers. The name Marion Shaw was still circling in my mind like a fly I couldn't swat away. He wasn't Parker. He wasn't anyone Celia had ever mentioned. But somehow, this stranger had my name, my address, and the kind of steady handwriting that told me one thing. He'd thought long and hard about writing this. I sat down at the dining room table, placed the envelope beside me, and stared at the letter like it might rearrange itself into something less terrifying. Then I opened it. Dear Elwood, I know you must be confused, maybe even furious. I'm not here to make that worse. What I'm about to tell you is something I should have done a long time ago, and if Celia hasn't told you by now, it's only because she was afraid. Afraid of what this truth would do to the both of you. But you deserve to know. Celia and I have been involved for nearly 6 years. She told me she was married. I told her I didn't want to be a secret. We fought, we paused, we came back together. But here's what matters now, she lied to me too. I only learned last week that she was still living with you, still pretending. I thought she had already ended things. She said she had, but lies build on lies. I didn't send this to hurt you. I sent it because you deserve the full truth, even if it comes from someone like me. If you want to talk, I'll be at Cafe Row on 6th, Tuesday at 10 a.m. If you don't come, I'll understand. But I hope you do. You deserve more than silence. Marion Shaw. I read it 3 times before I could breathe properly again. 6 years. They had been together for 6 years. That was over half our marriage. That means while we were going to marriage counseling, while I was researching adoption options for us, While I was crying into my pillow trying to understand why she was so distant, she was with him. I pushed back from the table, stood up, and felt dizzy. Everything I'd been living was fake. Not just the infidelity, but the intimacy, the small smiles, the subtle touches. All of it, practice theater. And the worst part? She had him believing it too. This Marion guy wasn't just some secret fling, he had been part of her life. And judging by the tone of that letter, he thought she was leaving me for him. Which meant there was a third story here. Not just mine, not just Marion's, but Celia's. And that story, whatever version she was spinning, was still unraveling. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even sit. I paced the living room with her phone still in my pocket, trying to decide if I should text her, scream at her, or block her entirely. Instead, I called her sister, Quinn. Now Quinn and I had always had a strained relationship. She thought I was too soft, too boring for Celia. She made jokes about my job, copywriting for a small outdoor gear company. But she picked up immediately. "Elwood," she said, sounding surprised. "Have you talked to Celia?" I asked, trying to sound normal and failing. There was a pause. Too long. I thought she was with you. No. She left this morning. No explanation. Another pause. Then a quiet, hesitant voice. She was supposed to meet me yesterday. She didn't show. Did she say anything weird to you lately? I asked. She's been distant, Quinn admitted. Even for her. A few weeks ago, she told me she was thinking of moving. That she needed a restart. I thought she was just being dramatic again. I thanked her, hung up, and finally sat back down. A restart. That's what this was to Celia, a new page. But instead of closing one book and opening another, she decided to tear the first one apart, burn the pages, and leave the ashes behind for me to sort through. I didn't know if I'd go meet Marion. I didn't know if I had the strength. But what I did know, for the first time all day, was that this wasn't about saving the marriage anymore. It was about figuring out how much of my life had been a lie, and whether anything I remembered was even real. I didn't sleep Monday night. I lay in our bed, my bed now, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me like it was mocking the stillness of everything else. The sheets still smelled like her. That faint, floral scent she wore every day. For a moment, I buried my face into her pillow and inhaled like a fool desperate for a memory. But it didn't bring back warmth. It brought nausea. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive until the highway ran out. I wanted to rip every framed photo off the walls. But instead, I just stayed still. Maybe I thought if I didn't move, the truth wouldn't either. By the time morning bled through the blinds, I had already decided. I was going to meet Marion. Not because I wanted to. Not because I thought he could offer redemption or answers I'd actually believe. But because I needed a face to pin this to. I needed to sit across from one of the actors in this twisted play and hear his version of the script. Row Cafe was in the historic part of town, all cobblestone sidewalks, hanging ferns, and waiters who called you sir, whether you looked like one or not. I hadn't been there in years. Celia used to like it. Now it felt like walking into enemy territory. I arrived 10 minutes early. Marion was already there. He was sitting in a corner booth by the window. Tan coat, slate gray scarf. No phone in hand. Just sitting, like he had all the time in the world. He looked older in person, maybe late 40s, but graceful, controlled. I hated him immediately. He stood as I approached, like this was some kind of negotiation. "Elwood," he said with a small nod. I didn't shake his hand. I just sat. There was an awkward pause. Then he sighed. "I'm not going to waste your time," he said. "You probably hate me." I said nothing. My jaw was locked so tight it hurt. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small leather folder. Slid it across the table. "These are copies of messages. Reservations. Photos. I'm not doing this to prove anything. I just thought you should see the same things I did." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were neatly organized documents. Like he was handing me a case file. There were screenshots of texts from Celia, dates, locations, endearments. Some were months old. Some were only days. And there were photos. Not explicit, but intimate. Her sitting on a hotel balcony, barefoot and smiling. Her in a scarf I bought for her birthday, wearing it on a trip I didn't know she took. Her in a coat that went missing a year ago. She said she left it at a work function. I closed the folder. "I thought she'd left you," Marion said softly. "She told me that. Multiple times." "She didn't," I replied. "She just learned how to lie without blinking." He nodded. "Yeah, I didn't want to believe it either." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw something unexpected. He wasn't smug. He wasn't defensive. He looked sad, tired, maybe even humiliated. And that's when it hit me. Celia had played us both. She crafted two lives, two stories, two men who both thought they were her future. And she managed to convince both of us that we were her only truth. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what Marion said next. She was planning something, Elwood. Something bigger. I don't know the full picture. But last time we spoke, really spoke, she said she was waiting for everything to go through. She didn't explain. Just smiled and said she'd be disappearing soon. Like vanishing. I didn't understand then. But now. I blinked. When was this? He looked me in the eye. 10 days ago. I leaned back. Heart pounding. Something was wrong. More than just betrayal. More than just infidelity. This wasn't just an affair. It was an exit strategy. And Celia hadn't just walked out of our life. She had plans to make sure she could never be followed. I didn't remember the drive home from Row Cafe. I think I ran a red light or two. Maybe I sat at a green one too long. Doesn't matter. The only thing I do remember was gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white and my wrists ached. I'd met the other man. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't slick or cold or arrogant. He was just as duped as me. And that terrified me more than if he'd been smug about it. Celia hadn't just cheated on me with another man. She had lied to him too. Lied with such detail and consistency that he bought her fantasy wholesale. And if she'd built a fantasy that detailed for him, what kind of labyrinth had I been living in? When I got back to the house, the air inside felt heavier. It was like the walls themselves were watching me. I walked straight into our home office, pulled open every drawer, and started digging through papers, receipts, envelopes, work documents. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just had this sinking feeling that I'd only scratched the surface. And then I found it, tucked behind a stack of old tax returns in a blue accordion folder. 2 notarized documents, dated a month ago. One was a quitclaim deed. Celia had transferred partial ownership of our house to a company I'd never heard of, Faro Trust LLC. The second document? A power of attorney, executed and signed, naming a woman I didn't recognize, Tara Wills, as the agent. My name was nowhere on it. I stood in the center of the room with that paper in my hand, and the silence suddenly felt suffocating, like I was underwater. I hadn't been paranoid enough. I hadn't been suspicious enough. I'd let her move freely while I bent backward trying to fix things she had no interest in saving. While I bought her medicine when she faked stomach cramps. While I stayed quiet when she said she needed mental space. While I waited on the couch for her to come home after networking dinners. This wasn't a one-night mistake or even a double life anymore. This was a strategy. One that had been playing out in front of me while I slept 2 doors down. I scanned through the folder again. Found a bank letterhead. A partial account number. Something about transferring assets. It was vague, but the name of the bank, Everspring Holdings, caught my attention. It wasn't a local bank. It wasn't even in our state. I dropped the papers on the desk and sat down, heart racing. My hands were clammy. My throat was dry. I'd always thought of myself as detail-oriented. I write for a living. I catch typos in menus, misquotes in product tags. But I'd missed the biggest typo of all, the one in my marriage. Suddenly, I remembered something from 2 weeks ago. Celia had asked me to sign a refinance document she said her accountant needed. I was rushing to a deadline. I signed it without reading. It was part of this. I opened my laptop, typed in Faro Trust LLC, and started digging. The company was registered in Delaware, a shell corporation. No employees listed. No business description. No contact information. Just a registration address and a digital signature. I kept scrolling. Found a Reddit post, of all places, from someone describing how their spouse used a fake LLC to hide money and transfer real estate before a surprise divorce. A wave of nausea hit me so hard I had to get up and run to the sink. I didn't throw up. I just stood there, dry heaving over an empty basin, waiting for the world to make sense again. Then the front door creaked open, and she walked in. Celia. Like nothing had happened. Like she was back from the grocery store. She stood in the doorway holding a canvas bag, dressed in a dark green coat, sunglasses still on. I didn't say a word. I just stared. She lowered the bag slowly and let out a long breath. Elwood, she said, and for the first time, she looked like someone who was nervous. Not guilty, not sad, just caught. Where have you been? I asked, my voice low and tight. I was going to explain, she said, stepping forward. I just needed a few days. To forge legal documents? To transfer property into an LLC? To turn your husband into a stranger in his own home? She stopped walking. Her mouth opened slightly. She wasn't prepared for that. You went through my files, she said finally. You vanished, I snapped. What was I supposed to do? Wait patiently while you rewrote our lives under a fake business name. There was a long pause. Her eyes flicked to the hallway, like she was already calculating her escape. I can explain, she repeated, softer this time. No, I said. Not this time. Because I had already heard too many of her explanations. I didn't want words anymore. I wanted the truth, the kind she couldn't spin. But even then, I knew the truth wouldn't come from her. It would come from the paper trail I had just uncovered, and the secret I was about to learn the next morning. A truth so twisted, so meticulously orchestrated, it would make me question whether I'd ever even known the woman I married. Celia didn't say much after that day. She tried. At first, she left handwritten notes on the nightstand, cooked breakfast I didn't eat, offered to talk through it all like adults. But the house had already grown colder. Not from anger. No, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done, and something about my quiet made her nervous. I think she was used to me chasing her, fixing things, apologizing for problems I didn't cause. But I'd reached the bottom, and it was solid. The next morning, I contacted an attorney. A good one, not cheap. I remember the look on his face when I handed him the folder Marion gave me, along with the documents I found in our office. He looked at me, adjusted his glasses, and said, Mr. Bramer, I don't think your wife anticipated you would ever fight back. And that was true. I think Celia saw me as soft clay, easy to shape, easier to leave behind. But grief has a strange way of showing you who you are. And heartbreak, it turns out, is the best kind of fire. It burns away everything unnecessary. All the excuses, all the delusions, all the ways you told yourself it was fine. It wasn't fine. It hadn't been for a long time. The divorce was swift. She didn't fight it. I think she thought I wouldn't go through with it, that I'd cave at the last second and beg her to stay. But I didn't. I signed every page with a steady hand. The house stayed mine. My name was restored on the deed. The LLC? Dissolved. Her attorney tried to play games, but the evidence I had, thanks to her arrogance, was bulletproof. She moved out on a gray Thursday morning. No goodbye hug. No final kiss. Just a box of her books, a few pieces of jewelry, and one last glance from the doorway. I didn't speak. I just watched her go, and when the door closed, it was like I could breathe again for the first time in years. I spent that summer alone. At first, I hated it, the silence, the stillness, the sudden emptiness of every room. But slowly, it became something else. Peaceful, honest. I started walking in the evenings. I picked up my old hobby of restoring antique radios, something I'd abandoned years ago when Celia called it a waste of time. I even fixed up an old Crosley she once tried to throw out. It works now. I keep it in the garage, and it plays the blues like it never forgot how. And then, about 6 months after she left, I got a letter. Not from Celia. From Marion. He'd moved to Oregon. Said he needed the ocean. Said he was rebuilding his life too. And strangely, he thanked me. Said that despite the wreckage, he was grateful to know the truth. He hoped I'd found peace. I did something I never expected. I wrote back. Briefly. Just to say I had. We still exchange letters sometimes. Never about her. Just life. Music. Weather. Two men who were hurt by the same storm and survived it in different ways. As for Celia, I don't know where she is now. I stopped checking. I stopped wondering. Not out of bitterness, but because my healing didn't need her shadow anymore. I'd spent too long searching for her version of happiness, trying to fit into a mold she kept breaking. That chapter's closed. And me? I'm still Elwood. Still quiet. Still careful. But I'm stronger now. Not because I became something new, but because I finally stopped apologizing for who I already was. The version of me Celia walked away from? Turns out, he was worth keeping. And I'm glad I did.